To the viewers and listeners out there, welcome back to Inclusive Plug powered by RECONOMY. This is episode 25. My name is Sabin. Joining me here is Zenebe Uraguchi, an economist and manager of a 12-country program in green and inclusive economic development called RECONOMY. Thank you for joining me, Zenebe.
Thank you for having me, Sabin. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Just recently, I hosted a discussion with two distinguished guests, Duncan Green, and professor in practice in international development at the London School of Economics, and he's also senior strategic advisor at Oxfam, and Nabanita Sen Bekkers, who is a director of opportunities unlimited. For the viewers out there, it's a technical and management consultancy firm specializing in private sector development. Also, Nabanita is part of the DCED secretariat, focusing on the results measurement work. We discussed what would be an alternative to the term beneficiary. Let's check it out.
I have an 8-year-old child who has cerebral palsy, and with her, I have often struggled with labels, so as to say, people use the word special child or even disabled child. And for me, she's just a regular 8-year-old. And I feel that when you box her into that certain category, automatically people tend to view her in a certain light. So I guess, just to maybe go back to the question you raised, I think it's the same term applies to beneficiary. Or, when you insinuate a person as a beneficiary, you look at that as a recipient of some sort of benefit, which you might create or might not create. So you don't put that person on an equal term. So for me, this question, you're going back to your question on what is a good term to use? I think call a person by who he is. A farmer is a farmer, youth is youth, an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. Why don't we just stick to those terms? And maybe if you want to speak about a particular group of people together, if you're working in a project and reaching different kinds of people, perhaps you could call them target people or something of that sort, but not to try and put a label to it.
Words are often not the problem. Words are both a kind of a product of an imbalance of power and a way of constructing imbalances of power. So calling someone a beneficiary, it constructs a world of us and them, uppers and lowers in the language of Robert Chambers. They are just sitting there waiting to benefit from our own altruism. So, but if you replace it with another word and you don't change the nature of the power imbalance, that word too will become, all meaning will be sucked out of it, and it'll become like partner. Now, partner should be okay, but it's become just the same, because the imbalance of power is still there. So I think there's only a certain amount you can do by changing the words. And I agree with Nabanita's about, something neutral. To me, recipient maybe is better than beneficiary, because it just describes a particular part of the aid business, which is someone giving money to someone else. But it still is imbued with this power imbalance. So I'm not sure how far you're going to get with playing around with the words, to be honest.
Thank you very much, Duncan. So let's dive deeper. Are you as likely to involve a beneficiary in design and budgeting as you would a partner? Let's say, right? So proposals outline program or project beneficiaries. Donors want reports on beneficiaries reached. So we talk about beneficiary feedback, right? So what's your experience, Duncan?
Well, that's interesting, because I suppose the way partner is used normally describes organizations rather than individuals, right? So a partner would be a CSO or a faith-based organization, a civil society organization, or a faith-based organization, or a piece of government. And therefore, you would anticipate them having the time and the capacity to work with you to create something. Beneficiary tends to imply individuals with that awful overlay of passiveness and lack of agency, in which case the best you can hope for really is a cash transfer, which at least gives them the agency to use the money as they wish. So I think you're right. If the word beneficiary carries with it the idea that they would not be involved except as recipients and as complainants. So increasingly, organizations like Oxfam are taking the whole feedback system of beneficiaries to complain about abuse or bad service more seriously. So there is some feedback, if you like, feedback loops, but not in the construction of projects so much. that tends to be through organizations.
Interesting. Nabanita, you worked actually with MSD projects and programs before. So what's your experience?
Yeah, I think a bit similar to what Duncan is saying, but I think what Duncan also said about the thing about considering their opinion also, like getting the feedback from them, I think that is quite important. Often in my work, unfortunately, I do see a lot of projects which are very supply driven, rather than being demand driven. So, we guess like this is their problem. So, we come up with all our solutions, and I think that really doesn't work. At the same time, also, I think like what Duncan said, that ultimately you need to get information from them, but you need to analyze it yourself. I'll give you a example. I was recently in Indonesia for a work, and we were trying to find out these vegetable farmers, why they have low productivity. And one particular farmer told us like, oh, it's all got to do with like, I'm not getting a good supply of seed, and the problem is with the retailer. So actually I went to AliExpress and I ordered the brand of seed that I wanted. So, according to him, the problem was basically it was the retailer who wasn't giving him the good seed. But later we found out through analysis that actually the retailer wasn't carrying that seed because it had the seed company had stopped producing that 3 years ago. So what he was buying from AliExpress turned out to be counterfeit seeds. So, that kind of analysis, that's something still a project needs to do on its own. But, certainly hear from the individual, but then you need to still analyze the information and come up with, try to use that to inform the design of a project.
I mean, great example, Nabanita. So I think there's a completely different approach to all this, which kind of highlights this weird us and them mentality. It's called positive deviance. So in a situation like Indonesia, the positive deviance approach would be to just identify the farmers who've got higher levels of productivity, with or without any aid intervention, because there will always be a spread of results, right? And then you can identify the positive outliers and just go and see why they're there. What are they doing differently?
Absolutely.
And they found a solution within the existing system and set, constraints.
Yeah.
And you don't intervene. You just go and see what's working. There's some asset-based approaches, appreciative inquiry. There's a whole bunch of areas which are the complete opposite of the deficit-based inquiry, which is at the heart of most aid projects, which is what do these people need? What do they lack? What are they not good at? Which is, in some ways, a really dumb point of entry. Let's go find out what people are good at and support it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe something that's big in the aid business.
The way we describe people shapes how we perceive and act toward them. Terms and words that are used in development seem to indicate who holds power and who doesn't. But then, does this matter? Sometimes it may not matter what we call someone. Rather, the way we treat and approach someone is more important than the description or labeling itself. Some refer to the beneficiaries as partners, but partners feels a bit unclear.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Sabine. But we will not now try to be terminology experts, but let's give it a try. I would say that humans have given names, to the things around them, to the people around them, to kind of identify what they are, who they are, such as a tree, plants, birds, fire, beneficiaries, quote unquote. But however, as time progressed, they also began giving names to social concepts, such as a friend, a husband, wife, development, donor, and then others. For me, this is not a bad thing, because I ask myself, how are we supposed to understand the world if we don't convey its meaning using words? So at its core, language is nothing more than a collection of words and socially shared rules that create communication between people. So as long as we get the job done, I think it may not matter, but sometimes it does matter, because beneath the words, you have the description of relationship in terms of power. So coming back to your question, to be a beneficiary implies that a person receives something good. Descriptively, beneficiary partially works from our experience. So in development, beneficiaries are largely disempowered, to be honest. So at the same time, however, it's questionable that what they are receiving is at all for free. For example, funds are raised on their behalf in their names, and hence we do have what I call downward accountability.
And that's exactly actually. And some development organizations use the word citizen instead of beneficiary. But isn't citizen largely a legal term? Like sovereign states have citizens, but development organizations like Helvetas don't, right?
Yes, but I would like also to ask you back the question: how about refugees and undocumented migrants? If you go out, here in Bern, in Switzerland, where I live, you see many of the people, moving around from Syria, from Eritrea, from Iraq, Afghanistan. So it's important to note that not all, quote unquote, beneficiaries are citizens. Surely their voices need to be heard as well.
Exactly. I know that you, Zenebe, wrote a blog article on this topic in 2019. Can you kind of walk us through your argument?
Oh, sure. I mean, what I tried to document was the issue of how development cooperation has increasingly been described as a global partnership between different countries, not between those with resources, like human, financial, to go out there and then support those that seek to get the support. What I was trying to argue was building a better world will require all of us, from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west, to be sort of empathetic, passionate, and above all, cooperative. However, reality bites. If you go to the different countries where development cooperation takes place, there is a requirement where we all need to recognize that solutions, mainly, if not at all, should come from people within the countries that aspire to have better lives through determining, their dignity and security, and through the use of their resources in a very sustainable manner. For me, this is not naive, but realistic and justifiable. But I asked myself also, at the same time, as I documented in the blog, for this to work, perhaps we need to move from being a kind of a tyranny of experts to becoming, genuine collaborators who are conscious of how we use words and labels. And indeed, I think we should also recognize that words are sometimes symbols, and they change meaning over time and in different contexts. So I think the evolution of language creates the opportunity for words to lose their meaning and maybe to liberate us from the stigma that they convey. So say some may sound, grammatically wrong, as Duncan was arguing. Others may seem really weird, but they are accepted and they become part of our day-to-day life. Yet we need to be conscious of the context of using them. So by letting words change meaning for us, we are, I should say, trying to redefine diversity and creating social change, if that makes sense.
Your argument makes sense because meaningful development cooperation in a messy world needs the recognition that solutions, mainly, if not all, come from people within the countries that aspire to have better lives.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I was trying to say, But at the same time, there is no straightforward answer, Sabine. On the one hand, I want to say that what is in the name? meaning, as Nabanita says, it may not matter. On the other hand, words have power. Their meaning crystallizes perceptions that shape our beliefs, drive our behavior, and I'm afraid ultimately create our world. So as Duncan argues, beneath words, there is an indication of who holds power and who does not. A good example is partnership, which is not a neutral term. Why I'm saying that it's not a neutral term? Because it kind of conceals, it kind of disguises, complex relationships of power and inequality, which are often, expressed through the control of one partner over the other. Then comes, how labels and words influence to create a person's self-image. For example, beneficiaries' perception of themselves and their abilities are often created, by words that are used about them, whether that person agrees with those words or not. So to follow up with what Nabanita was saying about her daughter, in order to emphasize that people with quote-unquote disabilities are capable of living full, independent, integrated lives within their community, I believe it is important to kind of consider how our use of language can affect unconscious attitudes, if you like, about disability, and then how our use of language can challenge those attitudes. It's not a case like sticks and stones will not break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It's not like that, But Duncan and I have something in common, We both love blogging. In 2018,
Exactly.
came up with, some broad categories of terms used in the development that need to be either maybe banned or rethought because of their quote unquote what he called awfulness. Terms like impactful, capacitating seem to be distorted Shakespearean language, so to speak. So those that are condescending, kind of looking down upon others, or patronizing include empowerment, capacity building, terms like the thous. I was born and raised in Ethiopia, but I left a long time ago, seem to be outdated and wrong, while those that try to make the speaker sound smart are leveraging an business model. So I think we need to rethink. But as I said, words evolve, words change, but we need to be conscious of using them. But sometimes I think we have to accept terms which may seem, as I said, grammatically wrong or weird. Maybe let me stop there.
There are so many terrible words in the aid business. I think there's awful terms like beneficiary, which just kind of carry this baggage of white savior complex, north-south colonialism. I would add empowerment, which is about us empowering them, which is terrible. Capacity building, us building their capacity. And when I was working briefly at DCED, an Indian civil society organization applied for funding to come and build the capacity of UK NGOs, which I thought was brilliant. But sadly, Claire Short, the minister, rejected it. But I thought that what a good idea, right? Because obviously UK NGOs don't know stuff, and that would have been a lot of fun. The poor, capital letters. These are all things which kind of fix that imbalance of power. So they're just awful words. But then you've got words which started off good and then have the life sucked out of them by the imbalance of power. So participatory, transformative. Oh my God. It's kind of sprinkled over people's documents like salt or pepper.
The participatory one, that's so good that you bring it up, Duncan, just like, how that...
Resilience is going the same way, sustainable. These words started off meaning something and now they just become... things that ignore complexity and the way everywhere is different. Best practice. I hate best practice. Because like best practice in Tanzania, why should that work in Madhya Pradesh? What are you talking about? So that's really annoying. And then there's just bad English. I'm a writer and I'm offended by words like learnings, which I just hate, and impactful. Oh, and nouns which become verbs, like impacting. I'm fighting a losing battle. Impacting, it's not a verb. Affecting is a verb. Impacting is just nonsense. But I give up on those.
I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down.
Sorry, you got me started, Sabina.
No, really good, actually. Thank you, Duncan. That's quite interesting. And as someone who is working in communications, like myself, in a program like RECONOMY that's using the market systems development approach, I saw in your list of words is also systemic change. And that's something we try to do at Helvetas. So what would you replace that with? Like, sometimes I just wish there was an application where I could just run through any text. And I saw the feedback there in your blog from someone, and it would give me plain language alternatives, right?
Well, you know, so the George Orwell wrote a fantastic guide to writing good English, you know, in one of his essays. And it said things like, you know, if two words just automatically go together in your head, don't use them, right? You know, so it's sustainable development. No, don't do it. So I think that's a place to start. An alternative to system change would be real life, maybe. You know, you know, this idea that systems are something really magical. Well, everybody's life is a system. Everybody's, well, you know, to try and explain systems thinking, I say, imagine you when you have a baby, you set out a log frame for the next 18 years for every activity designed to achieve the outcome of the perfect 18-year-old. That baby would grow up deeply disturbed, if not a serial killer. You know, that's not how systems work. So you just have to get it in. The aid system has kind of departed from normality and reality, and the words kind of keep it there. And so if we can just get back to using normal words, it might help a bit.
But Zenebe, if we are forced to answer what's the alternative of beneficiary, it would be stakeholders, right?
If we're forced, yes, I agree. To provide an example from a regional, inclusive, and green economic development called RECONOMY, which is a program of the Swedish government, SIDA, and Helvetas, a Swiss development organization. This program works, you know, to support women and youth who are our stakeholders, not passive beneficiaries. Why? They actively and intelligently navigate and manipulate, you know, the complex ecosystem of development initiatives and organizations. You know, they have a stake. Basically, they participate. So at Helvetas, we share, you know, our experiences from different countries. Considering that RECONOMY operates in two quite large and diverse regions of Europe, that's the Western Balkans and Eastern Europe, Eastern Partnership countries, we feel it is our responsibility to tell the stories of the people that we work with and share our experience of working and exchanging with different countries. So development should be human-centered, and then with a genuine interest in people and in their lives, who are our stakeholders. We work with them. They do have stakes.
I think, like, you know, Duncan has raised a lot of very, you know, relevant and useful advice. I think, like, especially going on to the systemic change, like, this is something like I also struggle a lot with in my work, especially when you throw around, like, you know, all these like blah, blah, blah words and you don't understand what it means. I remember when I started working, and I actually come from an actuarial science background, so I was new in development. And when I started working, like, you lost me after 2 pages when you used too much jargon. I just didn't understand it. It was very difficult for me as an outsider to come and, like, you know, try and understand it. So just use simple word and what it means, and that really, you know, helps communicate it with people.
No, but jargon has a purpose, right? It's not just neutral. So, you know, if I go, this is a systems problem,
Yeah.
and you feel worse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, yeah.
So these have a kind of, they reinforce the guild, the sort of closed world of the expert, you know, and that's their purpose partly. So jargon has a positive role as well. It saves a lot of time, it builds a sense of identity, but it clearly has an exclusionary purpose too.
Yeah. And it's also like what you said, Duncan, that also resonates very well, that, when you say that like these often words are really meant with well purposes, but then they take a life on its own. Like initially, I didn't really think much about like, the global South. I didn't, I just thought like, okay, North and South, it's fine. But then being a person who is from the global South, I remember very recently somebody, said something about like, it's your responsibility to do something for people from the global South. And I'm like, hang on a minute, I don't need help. Or like, then it does take a life of its own.
Yeah, and humor really, I love those Radiaid adverts that the Norwegian aid agency funded, which have the kind of campaign to send radiators from South Africa to Norway because it's so horribly cold. They just invert the logic, and some of them are really, the humor is great and they're quite sophisticated satires. That kind of thing can help expose the ludicrous nature of the language quite well. I think humor's an underused. Yeah, aid agencies don't do humor very well.
No.
They should.
Yeah. No, that's why your blogs are also a ray of light for a lot of people.
Yeah, and Oxfam just says, "Oh, we give up. Let him do what he wants." So that's
thank you very much. Very interesting discussion here. And Duncan, if you were forced to have an alternative to beneficiary, the word, right? You were saying recipient. Am I correct?
That's in the sort of close proximity, or I might say person.
Right.
Or like Nabanita said right at the beginning,
Right.
person qualified by farmer, trade unionist. The danger is even when you say farmer, trade unionist, you're also narrowing down their experience because people are intersectional, as we say. There we are. There's another one. And so the trade unionist may also be a feminist or actually a wife beater. They could both be trade unionists. So it's very hard. It's not easy getting this right, but I think at least not having these very crude pigeonholes would be a start.
Also considering that the beneficiary is not someone who receives the benefit passively, right? So they actively and intelligently navigate and manipulate the complex ecosystem of like development initiatives. If we are talking about not this classical humanitarian development, right?
Okay, well, look, how about investee? Right? So, I don't know. It's not going to catch on. It's just too weird. But the idea is, you're investing in these people and then they make you work.
Yeah.
So how do you capture that sort of sense rather than just, please give me some money?
It was a fascinating discussion with Nabanita and Duncan, but it doesn't end here. To achieve sustainable and scalable impact, we must work with everyone, including the disadvantaged and excluded, as well as the private sector.
If it is a correct terms you are using based on Duncan's list, yes.
True, exactly. As well as the private sector, civil society, and the public sector. However, also with one small change of a word changes the way we think. The impact doesn't end when we deliver our work, right? Impact begins there, when the people we serve go on to lead far beyond our work, far beyond us, and usually without us. After all, aren't we in the business of putting ourselves out of business, Zenebe, right? So to the viewers and listeners, if you are a beneficiary, let us know what you want to be called. Others have thought much more about this issue, and we'd love to listen to your additional reflections on the topic. Language and meaning constantly evolve while knowledge adapts and expands. Zenebe, thanks once again for being part of this episode.
Thank you very much indeed, Savin. You are doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you.